Hello, I am Crystal, and welcome to our Deep Dive AI on AI panel discussion on the future of agentic AI. I'm thrilled you're all here for what promises to be a pretty enlightening conversation. We've been hearing a lot about AI agents these days, but we're going to explore why, in many real-world business scenarios, simple agents alone aren't enough, and how these new ideas of sims and assistants might just fill in the gaps. Let's meet our panel.
Hey there, Crystal. Really excited to be here. My background is in enterprise AI integrations, so I've seen firsthand how businesses try to deploy agents in e-commerce, finance, and healthcare. And I gotta say, there's still a lot of friction.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I've focused on user experience and data privacy for quite some time, especially in consumer-facing apps. So the concepts of trust, personalization, and the so-called ecosystem are huge for me.
And hi, folks. I'm coming at this from an AI research angle. My work involves building distributed agent systems, plus I've worked on generative modeling. I'm excited to dig into how we can marry the best of generative AI with something that's more robust, more personalized, and honestly more acceptable to everyday users.
Wonderful. Let's start with some context. We know that AI agents are these autonomous programs that can do tasks for us. They might schedule a meeting, reorder supplies, or even drive a car in certain scenarios. But there seems to be a consensus forming that an agent by itself isn't the be-all, end-all for mainstream adoption, right?
Right. And if I can jump in with a practical example, in retail or e-commerce, companies have tried for years to use chatbots or shopping assistant agents. Those little pop-ups that say, "Hi, can I help you find something?" But behind the scenes, these chatbots are often just rule-based systems, or at best advanced Q&A modules. They can't coordinate complex actions like handling a return across multiple vendors, applying a coupon, or verifying your account while respecting your privacy.
Exactly. Those interactions end up being so limited. Consumers quickly lose patience because the moment the bot can't handle a slightly out-of-scope question, like, "Hey, I moved recently, can you update my shipping address and then confirm if that promo code is valid for the new region?" the agent breaks down. So you end up with an agent that can't generalize, can't pivot effectively, and can't deliver real value.
And ironically, that undermines the entire value proposition of saving time and effort. If you have to intervene and provide clarifications every 5 seconds, you're basically micromanaging the so-called autonomous agent. That's the classic scenario we've seen. Heavy marketing hype, but the moment real users have a slightly complicated use case, boom, we're back to phone calls and waiting on hold.
So where do sims and assistants come in? The paper we're referencing suggests this trifecta: agents, sims, and assistants. How do they interact, and why can't we just rely on agents alone?
Well, the idea is that we need a system that actually knows the user or the business environment in a meaningful way. That's where sims enter the picture. A sim is like a dynamic representation of you, the user, your preferences, your behavior patterns, your contextual data, and even your privacy thresholds. It's more than just a user profile with your name and interests. It can hold granular info, like how flexible you are with shipping delays, whether you typically prefer curbside pickup, or how you want your budget allocated each month.
Right. So, if we stick with the e-commerce example, a sim could say, "Okay, this user is price sensitive on certain categories like electronics, but prioritizes brand loyalty for skincare products." Then when an agent is doing its thing, like searching for an item or negotiating a shipping window, the agent can refer to the sim for context. Does the user want the cheapest option or the fastest shipping? Should it combine orders to reduce packaging waste because that's a known preference?
And that's where the assistant steps in. It's essentially the orchestrator. You can think of the assistant as a meta agent or the master controller that uses all these narrower agents, like a shipping agent, payments agent, recommendation agent, and then pairs them with the user's sims to ensure everything aligns with the user's actual needs.
So the assistant is kind of like the conductor of a symphony, where each agent is an instrument, but the conductor also has a score that's specifically tuned to the user's preferences. The SIM?
Precisely. And to give a more corporate angle, if we think about supply chain management in big enterprises, you might have multiple stakeholders: a procurement department, finance department, shipping carriers, inventory management, etc. In a typical multi-agent scenario, each department might have its own agent. But if none of these agents knows the user or the manager's preferences or the brand constraints, coordinating them can be chaos.
That's where these 5 big issues from the paper: lack of generalization, scalability, coordination, robustness, and ethical concerns really come to a head in business environments. One agent might be great at ordering raw materials, but it doesn't know the financial constraints set by the CFO or the environmental policies enforced by the company. We need a broader system that can juggle these constraints gracefully.
And that's exactly why agents alone, no matter how advanced the AI, will fail in some real-world scenarios. Even if you've got the greatest GPT-based agent that can generate super coherent text, if it can't unify with your internal data sources, respect your compliance rules, or factor in your personal or corporate preferences, you're going to end up with a fiasco.
Before we jump deeper, let's add some real depth and walk through, say, a hypothetical scenario. Let's imagine I'm the CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing company, and I want to automate my day-to-day tasks to reduce overhead and maybe keep my staff more focused on creative tasks. Can you paint that picture for how agents, SIMs, and an assistant would work together?
Absolutely. Let's say as CEO, you have a big trade show next month. You need marketing materials. You need to coordinate travel for your sales team, and you need to ensure the latest product prototypes are shipped to the show in time. You open your assistant in the morning and you say, "Hey, I need to plan for this trade show. Can you handle the logistics?"
The assistant checks your CEO SIM, which has your usual travel preferences, budget thresholds for trade shows, and your priorities, like brand consistency is crucial, or shipping cost might be less of an issue compared to timeliness. Then the assistant delegates tasks to various agents.
For instance, the travel agent might scout flights and hotels. The vendor agent might contact your usual marketing firm to produce brochures, while the inventory agent ensures the prototypes are ready for shipping.
All these agents are specialized in their domain, but they don't have the big picture. The big picture is governed by the assistant, guided by your CEO SIM. If an unexpected snag comes up, maybe the inventory is behind schedule, the assistant weighs your priorities. Is it more important to expedite production or pivot to a different product? Checks your SIM's preference for brand consistency, then orchestrates a solution.
Exactly. The assistant might even renegotiate with the marketing firm's scheduling through some negotiation agent. We need a fast turnaround. Can you do it for a rush fee? Meanwhile, your SIM is telling the system that you, as the CEO, typically sign off on anything below a certain budget, but if it goes beyond that, you want final approval.
So you, the CEO, aren't bombarded with details. You only get a ping if the system crosses a threshold you've defined, maybe an expensive vendor or a new shipping carrier that you haven't used before. Otherwise, the entire process is automated.
And that's the synergy. Each agent does something well, but if they don't have the user's context, we're back to a fiasco. Or if we rely on one giant black box agent that tries to do everything, it won't be specialized enough in each domain or might be overwhelmed. Splitting tasks out to specialized agents, coordinated by an assistant that references a user's SIM, makes the process more robust and scalable.
I love that example. It really highlights how agents alone just don't provide that end-to-end coverage. Now, let's dive deeper into some technical details. We've touched on the architecture, but how exactly might these 3 components communicate securely and ensure privacy? After all, we don't want a shipping agent seeing all the CEO's personal bank info.
Great question. So typically, you'd establish a set of APIs or messaging protocols that define how agents request data and how the assistant grants or denies these requests based on the user's SIM. Let's say the travel agent wants to book a flight. It might say, I need the user's frequent flyer program ID. The assistant checks with the SIM. Is it permissible to share that ID with this particular agent for this domain? The SIM's data can be segmented. Some bits might be super sensitive, while others are relatively benign.
Right. So that's how you ensure data minimization. The agent only gets the minimal subset of info it actually needs. And the SIM has multiple levels, one for personal preference details, one for sensitive identity info, and so on. The user might even have different SIMs for different roles, like a personal SIM for family travel and a business SIM for corporate events.
Exactly. And on the back end, you'd likely have a permissioned ledger or secure access control system that enforces these rules. When the assistant is invoked, it's the only entity that can actually see the entire picture of the user's data, because it's, in a sense, the user's proxy. But even it can be sandboxed so that if an agent tries to do something malicious, like glean personal info for unauthorized reasons, the request would be rejected.
That's really powerful. So from a business standpoint, this means you can have agents that handle very sensitive tasks like negotiating with, say, a bank or a supplier, and not worry about them rummaging through your HR files.
Precisely. And you might also want auditing. If you're in a regulated industry like healthcare or finance, the assistant should keep a log of what data was accessed, when, and for what purpose. That level of accountability is critical for real-world enterprise adoption.
On the user experience side, you'd want a dashboard of sorts, a place where I can see my SIMs, each with different privacy and personalization settings, and I can see which agents are authorized to do what. If I start noticing the marketing agent requesting my personal phone number for some reason, I can revoke that permission.
Exactly. We see a lot of potential for more advanced features here too, like differential privacy or zero-knowledge proofs, where you confirm certain data points to an agent without revealing the raw data. That might be overkill for some simpler tasks, but in areas like healthcare or legal, it becomes a game changer.
Fascinating. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about real-world businesses, like practical use cases that can be deployed today or in the near future. We've mentioned e-commerce and supply chain. Where else do you see an immediate impact if we adopt this ecosystem approach of agents, SIMs, and assistants?
Financial planning is a big one. Imagine a personal finance assistant that orchestrates multiple agents, one that tracks stock investments, one that pays your bills, and one that monitors your subscriptions. All of those agents reference a financial SIM that knows your risk tolerance, your monthly budget, and your philanthropic goals, for instance.
Another area is healthcare, where an assistant could coordinate your medical appointments across multiple specialized agents, one for insurance claims, one for pharmacy refills, one for personal health tracking. All guided by a healthcare SIM that knows your allergies, your chronic conditions, your preferences for telehealth versus in-person visits, etc.
And let's not forget team collaboration in large corporations. Instead of every staffer remembering to update the CRM system or coordinating on project management tasks, the assistant, powered by relevant agents, keeps track of dependencies, schedules, resource allocation, and so on. It even references a project SIM that outlines the team's capacity, the scope of the project, and any constraints like budget or milestones.
This is awesome. Now, I'd like you to address a skeptic. Let's say a CEO is listening and thinks, sure, this all sounds great in theory, but implementing a triple-layer system, agents, SIMs, and an assistant sounds complicated and expensive. What's your response?
I'd say, first, it's not as complicated as it sounds if you adopt it incrementally. You can start with a single domain, like travel booking, and deploy a narrow assistant with a user SIM that just covers travel preferences. Over time, you layer in more agents, a conference registration agent, an expense report agent, etc.
And the biggest payoff is that once you set up the foundational architecture, how the assistant and Sims interface, the agents become modular. Need a new capability? Just plug in a new specialized agent that follows the same protocols. The synergy multiplies as you add more domain-specific agents.
I agree. Plus, if you handle data privacy and user preferences in a robust way from day one, it's a lot cheaper than dealing with compliance fiascos or re-architecting everything after a data breach. So there's a strong business case for doing it right the first time, even if the initial build-out might be a bit more involved. That's a good point. It's like building a house with a strong foundation, right? Sure, it's more effort at the start, but it pays off in stability, scalability, and trust.
Couldn't agree more. And I want to highlight that user trust is huge. If your system becomes known for respecting user privacy and effectively personalizing tasks, you gain a competitive advantage. It's brand building at the same time.
Let's talk about the short-term versus long-term future. Where do you see these systems in, say, the next year, and where might we be 5 years from now?
In the next year, I think we'll see a lot of pilot projects. Enterprises might start with small, discrete tasks. For instance, an assistant that helps with vendor negotiations or automates parts of customer onboarding. They'll experiment with a few agents that can handle domain-specific tasks.
Right, and those early adopters will refine how the assistant communicates with the user, how the SIM is constructed, and how privacy is managed. We'll probably see some standardization attempts, like agent protocols or SIM schemas, so different vendors' agents can interact more smoothly.
5 years from now, I see a scenario where a typical user, like not just a tech-savvy person, interacts with a personal assistant daily. That assistant manages a bunch of specialized agents for everything from paying bills to scheduling an oil change, from reordering groceries to, well, finalizing corporate travel. The user might have multiple SIMs that handle different facets of their life. Work, personal, even a creative SIM that handles hobbies.
That's a bold vision, and honestly, it sounds amazing. Let's inject a bit of humor here. How might these systems fail spectacularly if implemented poorly?
Well, imagine the vacation booking agent decides to go rogue because it has incomplete instructions from your SIM. Next thing you know, you're scheduled for a 2-week luxury safari in Kenya when you just wanted a modest beach weekend.
Or your IoT home agent gets confused by your energy savings SIM, so the lights turn off every time you open the fridge or the thermostat is set to 50 degrees in midwinter. That's definitely not how you want to save on your heating bill. Right? Or the shopping agent misreads your grocery preferences and keeps delivering crates of pineapples you didn't actually request because it got stuck in some logic loop.
Ha! That's the comedic potential of poorly orchestrated AI. Jokes aside, it underscores that we need a well-designed ecosystem, not just patchwork solutions.
Exactly. That's why we emphasize that agents alone, even with fancy generative models, are not enough. You need structure, you need an assistant that can reason about user context, and you need SIMs that capture preferences, behaviors, and privacy constraints.
And from a business perspective, the key takeaway is that these systems can unlock massive efficiencies and new experiences if implemented correctly. But you have to be mindful of data security, user trust, and the actual value proposition.
I also want to touch on collaboration among agents, because in some scenarios, like negotiating with a vendor, the system might spin up multiple agents, each with a different strategy. They could coordinate among themselves. One tries a discount approach, another a bundling approach, and the assistant picks the best result that aligns with the user's cost threshold, time constraints, or brand guidelines as specified by the SIM. That's the beauty of well-coordinated multi-agent systems.
So it's not just user to agent or assistant to agent, but agent to agent collaboration, all happening under the watchful eye of the assistant. That's quite a robust network.
Precisely. And because we can store these agent workflows, maybe we cache successful negotiation strategies in some local memory or repository, the system gets smarter over time, right? It learns that the user typically likes to bundle purchases for free shipping, so the next time it tries that approach first.
And that's how we begin to solve the problem of scaling up to complex, real-world tasks. These smaller, specialized agents can be combined in many ways, and as the system learns from repeated interactions, it becomes more confident, and the user sees more tangible value.
Just to add, it also helps address the brittleness issue. Instead of having one giant model that either fails or succeeds, we break tasks into smaller compartments. If one agent fails, the assistant can route the task to a different agent or notify the user that something needs manual intervention. It's more resilient.
This is incredibly thorough. I'd love each of you to offer a final thought on what businesses or even everyday users should do today to prepare for this agent SIM assistant paradigm.
My advice: start small. Define a domain where you can really benefit from automation. Maybe it's invoice processing, maybe it's scheduling. Then set up the architecture so you have an assistant with basic SIM data. Plug in a specialized agent, monitor how it performs. Scale up once you see value.
I'd say focus on the user experience and privacy aspects. Don't just tack on a privacy policy at the end. Build a system that's transparent about how data is used. Give users clear controls over their SIMs, how their data is shared, how decisions are made. That approach fosters trust and leads to better adoption.
From a technical standpoint, I suggest looking into modular architectures, well-defined APIs, and standardized protocols for agent communication. Embrace the principle that your assistant is the policy decision point, while your agents are the policy enforcement points, and your SIMs encode user or organizational preferences. That way, the system remains flexible and scalable.
Fantastic wrap-up. Thank you all so much. It's clear that the future of AI isn't just about building a super intelligent agent. It's about layering autonomy with user-centric design, privacy, and an ecosystem that truly understands context. We hope our listeners have gained deep insights and maybe a chuckle or two along the way.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Crystal. Thanks for having us.
Likewise, I hope folks walk away excited, but also thinking carefully about the design of these systems.
Great conversation, everyone. Let's make sure we don't end up with an endless supply of pineapples or a freezing cold house.
Exactly. That concludes today's podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Stay curious and keep exploring new frontiers in AI.